She pressed the bloodied handkerchief into her fist so no one would see it shaking, lifted her chin, and watched the only man legally bound to love her turn his back and walk into the sunlight without once saying her name. The carriage was waiting. He did not look back. And a woman everyone in the county had already decided was as good as dead made a promise to herself that would take 3 summers to keep. If you love a story where the forgotten woman rises, subscribe and stay with me to the very end, and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The paper was signed before the vows were finished. Evelyn Whitmore watched the pen move across the marriage contract, the way she'd once watched her father sign away the last of the Whitmore land quick businesslike, without a tremor of feeling. The ink was still wet when Colonel Nathaniel Carter set the pen down and stepped back from the small table the minister had brought into the parlor. He did not wait for it to dry. He did not fold his hands. He simply looked at the document as though it were a supply requisition he'd been ordered to approve. And then he looked at the window. And then he looked at nothing at all. "That concludes the arrangement," the lawyer said. "It does," Nathaniel answered. Evelyn coughed. She'd been holding it since the morning the way she held everything now, carefully, with both hands cupped around it so it wouldn't spill out and disgrace her. But her body was no longer a thing she could command with dignity, and the cough tore up through her chest and doubled her over, and when she pressed the handkerchief to her mouth, she felt the wet warmth bloom against the linen and knew without looking that it had come up red again. Nobody moved toward her. The lawyer glanced at the colonel. The minister studied his own shoes. And Nathaniel Carter, her husband of perhaps 90 seconds, turned his head just enough to see her folded over the chair and said in a voice with no more heat than a man reading a weather report, "Is she well enough to travel?" "I am standing here," Evelyn said. She straightened. It cost her, but she straightened. "You may ask me." He looked at her then, full on for the first time all morning. His eyes were the color of river ice, and they moved over her the way a man's eyes move over a horse. He isn't planning to buy, noting the flaw, the weakness, the price already paid and regretted. "Are you well enough to travel?" he said. It wasn't a question the second time either. "I've traveled sicker than this," she lied. "Good." He picked up his gloves. "The carriage is waiting." There it was. 3 words. She would remember them the rest of her life, though she did not know it yet, standing in her dead mother's parlor with her father's debts around her neck like a millstone and her own blood cooling in her palm. The carriage is waiting. Not "I'm sorry," not "we'll manage," not even her name, which he had heard exactly twice, and she was certain already forgotten. "Colonel Carter." The lawyer cleared his throat. "There is the matter of the estate. Oak Ridge is hers to keep or bury herself in. I've no use for it." "And should she—" The lawyer stopped. He was a delicate man who did not like the word. "Should she die?" Nathaniel finished for him, pulling on the first glove. "The property reverts, the debts are settled, and the Whitmore name is retired with honor, which is more than it's had in a decade." He said it without cruelty, which somehow made it worse. Cruelty would have meant he'd thought about her. This was only accounting. Evelyn's fingers closed hard around the ruined handkerchief. "You're leaving me at Oak Ridge," she said. "I'm leaving for the campaign in 3 days. The house is 100 miles from any front. You'll be safer there than here." He fitted the second glove. "You'll be attended." "By whom?" "There's staff." "There was staff," she said. "The last letter I had, the house had 2 servants left and a leaking roof. My father hadn't paid anyone at Oak Ridge in 2 years. For the first time, something flickered behind the ice. Not guilt, not even surprise. It was the small, irritated recalculation of a man who has been handed a slightly larger problem than he was promised. "Then you'll hire more," he said. "You're mistress of the house now. Do with it as you like." "With what money?" "With whatever you can manage." He turned toward the door. "I don't expect a report." She should have let him go. Every rule she'd been raised on told her to let him go quietly, to be grateful to be small. Her mother had died being small. But the blood in her mouth had burned something loose in her and Evelyn Whitmore heard her own voice come out clear and cold across the room. "You won't even remember my name," she said. "Will you?" He stopped in the doorway. "By the time you're a week gone," she went on, and the words came steadier the more she spoke them. "You'll think of me, if you think of me at all, as the sick one, the Whitmore girl, the dead I married. You'll not remember the color of my eyes or the sound of my voice. You'll get a letter one winter telling you your wife has died, and you'll have to ask your aide which wife they mean." The minister made a small scandalized noise. Nathaniel didn't turn around. But he didn't leave either. For a long moment, he stood framed in the doorway, with the summer light coming hard and gold behind him, and his shoulders, she saw it. She'd remember it. His shoulders went very still, the way a soldier's do when a shot's been fired, and he's counting to see if it hit him. "Evelyn," he said. She hadn't expected him to know it. "Your eyes are gray," he said, "like weather that can't decide. And your voice does this thing at the end of a sentence where it goes down instead of up, like you've already decided no one's listening." He put on his hat. "I remember more than you'd like, Mrs. Carter. I simply have no use for any of it. Good day." And then he was gone, and the sound of the carriage was real wheels on the drive, and the summer heat pressed in through the open door where he'd left it swinging, and Evelyn Whitmore sat down very slowly in her mother's chair, because her legs had stopped agreeing to hold her. The doctor came that afternoon. Her father had sent for him one last expense before the estate changed hands. A final gesture of a man who'd sold his daughter, and wanted she supposed to feel he'd done his duty by her health, if not her heart. Dr. Elias Prue was old and honest, and Evelyn had always liked him for the second thing, even when she hated him for the first. "Well," she said when he'd finished listening at her back with his little wooden trumpet and folding it away. "Say it plain. I've had a plain sort of day." "Consumption," he said. "In the lungs. You've known that." "I've known that. It's worse than the spring." He sat down heavily across from her. "The blood's coming more. The fevers'll come with the heat, not against it. Summer's cruel to lungs like yours. Everyone thinks winter's the killer. But it's the heat that wears you down, drains the strength before the cold ever gets its chance." He rubbed his face. "Evelyn, child, I'll tell you what I'd tell my own daughter. I don't think you see another spring." She was quiet. "You've got the summer," he said, gentler now. "Maybe into the fall if you're careful and lucky and you don't take a chill. But I'd be lying to you if I dressed it up, and you've never once thanked me for a pretty lie." "No," she agreed. "I haven't." "Where will you go?" "Oakridge." His face changed. "That ruin alone." "I'm married now, doctor. I go where my husband keeps me." She heard the bitterness and swallowed it. "He's put me at Oakridge and gone off to his war. I'll not see him again, most like." He said as much without saying it. "Oakridge will kill you faster than the disease," Prue said flatly. "There's no fire kept in half those rooms. The well went bad. The garden's gone to seed. A well woman would struggle there. A sick one." He stopped. "You'll die in a cold house full of strangers who won't come when you call." "Then I won't call," Evelyn said. He blinked at her. "If I've got the summer," she said slowly, and she was working it out, even as she spoke, the way you work out you're standing up only after you've already done it. "Then I've got the summer, and I would rather spend it doing one useful thing than lie in a borrowed bed waiting for the cough to finish what it started." She looked at her hands, her mother's hands, thin, pale, but not yet a corpse's. "My whole life I've been managed, doctor. Married off, moved about, spent like coin. My father spent me. My husband warehoused me. Everyone in this county has already decided the date of my funeral, and I expect there's a wager on it at the tavern." "There is," Prue admitted, wincing. "I'll not tell you the odds." A laugh escaped her, and it hurt, and she pressed the handkerchief to her mouth again. But it was a laugh all the same, the first true one in months. "Of course there is." She lowered the cloth. "Well, let them lose their money." "Evelyn, I mean it as I say it." She stood, and this time her legs held. "I am going to Oakridge, And I am not going there to die quietly so that everyone's arithmetic comes out even. If the summer's all I have, I'll not sit in it. I'll use it." She looked at him. "Will you help me, or will you tell me I'm a foolish dying girl and take your bag home?" The old man looked at her for a long time. Then he reached into that bag and took out a stub of pencil and a scrap of paper. "Cool rooms not cold," he said. "Never let them shut you in a fireless room to save fuel the damps. What does it? Broth with meat in it, not the thin stuff for invalids you need building up, not starving down. Boil your water, the well's bad." He was writing as he spoke. "Honey and whorehound for the cough. Rest when the fever climbs, but move when it breaks a body that never moves, forgets how." He tore the paper off and pressed it into her hand. "And this. Most of all this. Every doctor I've ever known will tell you the sick recover twice as fast when they've a reason to. Give yourself a reason, girl, a real one, something out ahead of you that you'd hate to leave unfinished." He closed her fingers over the paper. "That's not medicine, but it's true." Evelyn folded the paper and put it against her chest over the sickness like a compress. "I've got a reason," she said. "What is it?" "To be there," she said, "and running that estate like it was mine to begin with on the day Nathaniel Carter comes home." The staff at Oak Ridge numbered 3, not 2, and all 3 of them expected her to die. She could see it the moment the carriage came up the ruined drive, and she stepped down into the summer heat, coughing thin, holding herself upright by force of will. The 3 of them stood in a ragged line at the front steps. An old man, a boy, and a broad woman with her arms crossed, and they looked at Evelyn, the way you look at weather that's coming. Something to be endured, not welcomed, something that would pass. "Ma'am," the old man said, and touched his hat, but there was no warmth in it. "Josiah, I keep the grounds what's left of 'em." "There's not much left of them," Evelyn observed. "No, ma'am, there ain't." The boy said nothing. He was perhaps 14 all wrists, and he stared at the blood-flecked handkerchief in her hand with the frank horror of the young. The broad woman uncrossed her arms only enough to gesture at herself. "Hannah, I do the cooking and such cleaning as gets done, which lately is little." She looked Evelyn up and down without kindness. "You'll want the east room. It's the only one with a whole ceiling. The colonel wrote you'd be—" She paused, choosing "convalescing." "Did he?" "Wrote we was to keep you comfortable," Hannah said, "and not to trouble ourselves overmuch on account of—" She stopped. "On account of I'll be dead by the fall." Evelyn finished for her in exactly Nathaniel's flat accounting tone, "and there's no sense wasting effort on the perishable." Hannah had the grace to color. The boy's mouth fell open. Josiah studied the sky. "He didn't write it so hard as that, ma'am," Hannah muttered. "But that's what he meant." Evelyn climbed the steps. It took everything she had to climb them without gripping the rail. But she'd decided somewhere on the 100-mile road that these 3 would never once see her reach for a rail. "I'll tell you now what I told my doctor, so we've no confusion in this house going forward. I know what's in my lungs. I know the wager at the tavern. I know every soul in this county has already spent my death like it's money in the bank." She reached the top step and turned, and she was breathing hard, but her voice held. "I don't intend to pay out." "Ma'am," said Josiah, "when was this house last profitable?" The 3 of them exchanged a look. "Profit," Josiah started. "When did Oak Ridge last make more than it cost? When did the fields last sell? When did anyone here draw wages that weren't 3 months late?" "The old master," Hannah began. "My father-in-law, or the colonel. The colonel's father. God rest. He passed 6 year back, and it's gone down and down since. The colonel never comes. Sends money twice a year less than he ought, and we make do." Hannah's chin came up defensive. "We done what we could with what we got." "I'm sure you have." Evelyn looked out over the grounds, the choked garden, the sagging fence line, the far fields gone silver and useless with weed. "How much money is left of what he sent this year?" Silence. Hannah. The cook's jaw worked. "A little." "How much?" "Enough for the summer. Just." "For the summer if I die on schedule," Evelyn said. Enough to keep one dying woman quiet and fed until the fall, and then he'll not need to send more, will he? That's the sum he calculated. Feed her till she's gone. She saw from Hannah's face that she'd struck it exactly. That's what you were told to make it last. The boy spoke for the first time. That true, Hannah? His voice cracked on it. Is that what the letter— Hush, Micah, Hannah said, but there was shame in it now. Evelyn looked at the boy Micah, and something in his young, horrified face steadied her more than the doctor's paper had. I'm going to tell you 3 something, she said, and you may believe me or not, and it makes no difference to me which, because I'll prove it either way before the leaves turn. I did not come here to be kept quiet and fed until I die. I came here to run this estate. All of it. The fields, the house, the money, the lot. I mean to make Oak Ridge pay for itself before the summer's out, and I mean to have this house whole and warm and worth something by the time its master comes home from his war. She let that sit. And when he comes back expecting to find a grave, he's going to find a going concern, instead with my hand on every ledger and my name on every account, and he is going to have to look at me, Josiah, full in the face. And remember it. For a long moment no one said anything. A crow called somewhere out over the dead fields. Then Josiah, old Josiah, who kept the grounds that weren't there anymore, did a thing that surprised all of them, himself included. He took off his hat. Not the little dismissive touch of before. He took it clean off and held it against his chest. My wages is 4 months short, ma'am, he said quietly. And I'm too old to find another place, and I've stayed on out of nothing but spite and habit watching this house die, same as it watched everything else die. If you mean what you're saying, his voice caught. If you mean it, I'll not draw a wage till the house can pay one honest, and I'll break my back for you. That's the truth as I know it. Josiah, Hannah started. You hush, the old man said not unkindly. You heard her same as me. That's not a dying woman's talk. I buried my wife of a consumption, Hannah. I know what dying sounds like, and that— He pointed his hat at Evelyn. That ain't it. Evelyn's throat was tight. She would not weep. She had not wept when the pen crossed the paper or when the carriage rolled away, and she would not weep now in front of the first person in a year to look at her and see something other than a corpse in waiting. It ain't, she agreed when she could. Thank you, Josiah. Hannah looked from the old man to the boy, to the thin gray-eyed woman on the steps, and Evelyn watched something shift and settle in the cook's broad, wary face. Not trust yet. Trust would come slow and be earned, but the first cousin to it, a willingness to see. You'll need building up before you can run anything, Hannah said gruffly. I'll not have you fainting into the ledgers. Doctor, tell you what to eat. Broth with meat in it, Evelyn said. Not the thin stuff for invalids. Good, said Hannah, because I never learned to make the thin stuff, and I wasn't about to start. And she turned and went inside, and it was the closest thing to an embrace the woman was capable of, and Evelyn understood it as one. That night, Evelyn Carter sat alone in the East Room, the one room with a whole ceiling with a single tallow candle and a stack of ledgers Josiah had dug out of the master's dead study, and she began the work that would either kill her before the disease could or save her longer than anyone in the county was willing to bet. The books were a disaster. 6 years of neglect entries trailing off mid-page whole seasons, unrecorded debts and half-debts, and IOUs from tenants long gone. She'd learned figures from her father before he learned to hate the sight of them, and she went through the pages line by line, coughing into her handkerchief between the columns, her fever climbing as the doctor had promised it would with the summer dark. She was still at it when the candle guttered low and she heard the door creak. The boy, Micah, standing in the doorway in his nightshirt with a rushlight staring at her the way he'd stared at the blood that morning. You should be abed, Evelyn said, not looking up from the ledger. You should too, ma'am. Hannah says the fever's worse at night for lungs. Hannah's right. She turned a page. But the fever doesn't do the accounts. Go to sleep, Micah. He didn't go. He came in instead and stood at the edge of the candlelight, and when he spoke, His young voice had lost its horror and found something else underneath it. "Is it true," he said, "what you said on the steps, that you can make it pay? My ma's dead, and my pa's gone west, and Josiah's the nearest thing I got, and Hannah, and if the house goes under, they'll turn us all out, and I got nowhere. So I got to know if it's true, or if you was just—" He searched for the word. "If you was just being brave, on account of the dying." Evelyn set down the pen. She looked at the boy. Really looked the way Nathaniel Carter had never once looked at her. And she saw everything hanging on her answer. This child's whole small, frightened future balanced on whether the sick woman at the desk was telling the truth or telling a story. "Micah," she said, "come here. Look at this." He came. She turned the ledger so the rushlight caught it and ran her thin finger down a column. "This is the North Field. 12 acres. Gone to weeds 6 years. Everyone says it's dead ground now. No good to anyone." Her finger moved. But here, 3 years back before the master died, that same field brought in more than the whole rest of the estate combined. It's not dead ground. It's neglected ground. There's a difference wide as the ocean, and only lazy men can't see it. She tapped the page. "The money's still in the dirt, Micah. It's still in the walls of this house, and the timber of that fence, and the water of that well if we clean it. Nothing here is dead. It's only been left." She looked up at him. "The way I've been left. And I have got exactly 1 summer, and possibly not even that to prove that a thing everybody's given up on can be brought back to worth. Do you understand me?" The boy stared at this column of figures at her thin finger, holding the place at her fever-bright eyes. "You mean the house," he said slowly. "And you mean you." "I mean both," said Evelyn Carter. "I mean the same thing twice." Micah was quiet a long moment. Then he set his rushlight down on the desk beside her candle, so there'd be more light to read by, and he pulled the other chair around, and he sat. "Then I ain't going to bed," he said. "Show me the numbers. If I'm going to break my back for it same as Josiah, I want to know what I'm breaking it for." And so it was a boy of 14 who kept the first watch with her. The two of them bent over 6 years of ruin by 2 guttering lights, while 100 miles to the east, a colonel who could not stand the sight of life packed his campaign trunk and did not think of his wife's name, and while an entire county slept easy on the certainty that the Whitmore girl would be in the ground by the fall. She coughed blood into her handkerchief twice more before dawn. She did not stop working. When the first gray light came up over the dead North Field, Evelyn had a plan drawn in her own hand across the back of 6 ruined ledger pages. What to sell, what to plant, whom to hire back, which wing to close and which to save, how to stretch the colonel's insulting little sum of quiet money into the seed of something that would never need his charity again. She rolled the pages, and she stood slowly holding nothing, and she walked to the window, where Josiah was already out in the gray, with a scythe cutting the first line into the weed, as if he'd known before she told him exactly where she'd want to start. He looked up. He touched his hat. This time there was warmth in it. Evelyn Carter lifted her hand to the window glass, blood still faint at the corner of her mouth, fever still burning behind her eyes, and she pressed her palm flat against the cool pane, the way you seal a promise you don't yet have the breath to say aloud. Behind her, the boy had fallen asleep at last, with his head down on the open ledger, one hand still resting on the column of figures that proved the ground was only sleeping. In front of her, the old man cut his slow, steady line into 6 years of surrender. And Evelyn Whitmore Carter, the sick one, the debt, the woman whose funeral had already been priced at the tavern, looked out over every dead thing that had been left to her, and understood with a clarity that burned brighter than any fever that she was not going to die on anyone's schedule but her own. The first month at Oak Ridge, Evelyn Carter learned that the county had not merely bet on her death. It had planned for it. She learned it from a man named Silas Crane. He came up the drive on a good horse the second Tuesday of July, dressed better than anyone she'd seen since her wedding, and he did not knock. He was already in the front hall when Micah found him already looking up at the water-stained ceiling with the calm proprietary eye of a man appraising a thing he intended to own. "Fetch your mistress, boy," he said. "She's in the study, sir, but she's dying. I know, that's why I've come." Crane handed the boy his hat, as if Micah were a servant hired for the purpose. "Tell her Mr. Crane is here about the estate. She'll want to hear it." Evelyn heard the whole of it through the study door, because Micah had left it open, and she came out into the hall with a ledger still in her hand and her sleeves pushed up from work, and Silas Crane turned to greet her and stopped. He'd expected a bedridden woman. She could see the recalculation move across his face, the same flicker she'd seen in Nathaniel 3 years' worth of memory ago, except Crane recovered faster and smiled, and it was a smile she trusted less than she'd trusted the ice in her husband's eyes. "Mrs. Carter." He bowed. "Forgive the intrusion. I hold your father's notes." "My father's dead, Mr. Crane. His debts aren't." He said it gently, the way a man says a thing he's enjoyed rehearsing. "Your father borrowed against Oak Ridge before your marriage. Considerable sums. The Colonel's settlement covered his own family's portion, but the Whitmore debts, your debts now by marriage, remain outstanding. I've bought the paper on them." He drew a folded document from his coat. $1,100, due in full by the 1st of September. The hall went very quiet. Micah in the doorway had gone white. Josiah had come in from the yard at the sound of the strange horse, and stood now with a rake still in his hand, and Hannah had appeared from the kitchen with flour to her elbows, and all three of them were looking at Evelyn, the way you look at someone who's just been shot and hasn't yet fallen. $1,100. She had in the whole of the estate's accounts perhaps 40. "September 1st, Evelyn said. "The 1st, yes. I'll be dead by then." She said it flatly, watching him. "That's the wager at the tavern. You'd know I expect you placed it." Crane's smile didn't waver, but it changed, and in that change she read the whole shape of the thing. "I placed nothing, Mrs. Carter. I merely observe that if the sum can't be met, the estate reverts to the note-holder in settlement, which would be myself." He tucked the paper away. "I'm a patient man. I've no wish to trouble a sick woman's last summer. Sign the estate over to me now, and I'll grant you the use of the East Room and your keep until comfortable, dignified. No creditors at your door, no worry about the figures." He spread his hands, generous, reasonable, obscene. "You'd want for nothing, and you'd not have to spend your final weeks pretending to run a dead property." There it was, the whole plan laid out clean. He hadn't come to collect. He'd come to wait to install himself as her keeper, to have Oak Ridge fall into his hands the moment she stopped breathing, and to make it look like mercy while he did it. "You've thought this through," Evelyn said. "I like to be prepared." "So do I." She turned to the boy. "Micah, my father-in-law, kept his old survey maps in the study. Bottom drawer, the long ones. Bring me the one marked North Parcel." Crane's smile flickered. "Mrs. Carter, there's no need to trouble yourself. There's every need." She took the map from Micah's hands and unrolled it across the hall table, and she put her finger on it, the way she'd put it on the ledger for the boy that first night. "This is the North Field, 12 acres. It's on your list of dead assets, I'd guess worth pennies. But the survey shows a spring at its head here that hasn't been tapped in 6 years, because no one's cleared it." She looked up at him. "You bought my father's paper cheap, Mr. Crane, because you priced this estate as a corpse. You priced the fields as weed and the well as bad and the house as rot. But you didn't walk the ground. You bought it off a ledger. The valuation is wrong," Evelyn said, "and I know it's wrong because I've spent a month walking every acre you priced from a chair in town. September 1st, you said. $1,100. She rolled the map back up with steady hands. "You'll have it." Crane laughed. He couldn't help it. It came out of him before he could stop it. "You'll raise $1,100 in 7 weeks, from a ruined estate, while dying." "Yes. Mrs. Carter, I admire the spirit truly, but let us be— I'll want a receipt when I pay," she said, "so bring your notary. 1st of September. Good day, Mr. Crane. Micah will fetch your hat." She turned and walked back into the study, and she did not let her legs shake until the door was shut, and she did not let the cough come until she heard his horse going back down the drive. Then she sat down hard and pressed the handkerchief to her mouth, and it came away red, and she stared at it for a long moment in the dim room. $1,100. Josiah came in without knocking. He'd left the rake outside. His old face was grim. "I know Silas Crane," he said. "Knew his father before him. They've been buying up dead farms round this county 20 years waiting on folks to fail. He's not lying about the note, ma'am. He'll have it legal to the letter. And if you can't pay—" "I heard him, Josiah." $1,100. The old man's voice was quiet. "I got to tell you honest, same as I always will. There ain't $1,100 in this whole estate to be squeezed out by September, not if we sold the roof off the house. A good year, a whole year in the old master's best days, this place cleared maybe 800. And that was 6 years and a lot of rot ago." He looked at her. "I'll break my back, same as I said. But I won't lie to you that breaking it'll be enough. I've seen men lose land to the Cranes before. It don't come back." Evelyn folded the handkerchief so the red didn't show. "Then we don't do it the way it's been done before," she said. "Ma'am, every farm the Cranes have taken they took slow, didn't they? Watched it fail, waited for the debt to come due, moved in when the family was too tired and too broke to fight. They win by waiting." She stood and crossed to the window and looked out at the north field where the first cut line Josiah had made a month ago had widened now into a proper clearing, dark earth showing through where the weed had been. "So we don't give him time to wait. We don't stretch this out over years the way he's counting on. We make Oak Ridge pay in weeks. Fast. Loud. Before he can move." She turned. "How much is a standing crop worth, Josiah, if you sell it in the field before harvest, to a buyer who does his own reaping?" The old man frowned. "Less than a harvested one, 2/3 maybe, but it comes in now, this month, not in October." She was working it fast, the plan reshaping itself as she spoke. "The Cranes win by patience, so we win by speed. We don't play the long game against a man who's better at it. We flip the board over before he's set his pieces." Josiah stared at her. "That spring in the north field," she said. "The one on the survey. Is it real?" "It's real. Silted up, but real. Water's the one thing this land ain't short of. It's just gone untended like all the rest. Then here's what we're going to do." What they did over the next 3 weeks made the county talk. She had them clear the spring first, because water was the thing every neighboring farm was short of in a dry July, and by the second day of digging, Josiah struck the flow clean, and it ran cold and steady down into the north field like it had been waiting 6 years to be asked. She had Micah ride to the 3 nearest farms with an offer no one had ever heard from Oak Ridge water rights through the dry season cash on the barrel. First come, first served the Carter estate to run a channel to any man who paid before the month was out. 2 farmers laughed at the boy and sent him home. The third, a hard-pressed man named Doyle, whose corn was curling in the heat, rode up himself that same evening to see if it was true, and found old Josiah standing in a cleared field beside running water, and paid $60 on the spot for a season's channel, and told 2 neighbors on his way home. By the end of the week, the other 2 farmers had come back not laughing anymore. $190. Evelyn wrote in the ledger in her own hand, and Micah watched her write it and said, "That's real money," in a voice like he didn't believe it, and Hannah, who had drifted to the study door with a plate of the good broth, said nothing but stood there longer than she needed to. "It's not 1,100, Evelyn said. "It's a start. It's $190 more than this house has seen in a year," Hannah said, and then gruffly setting the plate down hard, "Eat, you're gray again. You'll not close any more deals dead." Evelyn ate. She'd learned that from the doctor's paper, and from her own body, which had begun slowly, so slowly she almost didn't trust it to give a little back when she fed it. The fevers still came at night. The blood still came in the mornings. But the terrible drowning weakness of the spring, the sense of being a candle guttering down, had steadied into something else, not health, but fuel. She burned through her days now, instead of merely fading through them, and she found that a body with a reason burned differently than a body without one, exactly as old Prue had promised. The standing wheat she sold to a miller 2 counties over who came with his own crew and reaped it green gold in a single hot week, and it fetched $240 less than a harvest would have brought, but months sooner than a harvest could have come. The dead orchard on the south slope she couldn't save, but Josiah knew a man who'd pay for the aged applewood itself, seasoned hard, prized by furniture makers, and that was $90 for trees everyone had written off as firewood. She sold the contents of the closed West Wing furniture no one had sat in for 6 years moldering under sheets to a dealer from Boston, who came expecting to fleece a dying woman and left having paid $310 because Evelyn had read every one of the old master's inventory books by candlelight and knew to the piece what the mahogany was worth. $830. She wrote 3 weeks in and set down the pen and looked at the sum and for one moment let herself feel how far it was and how far it wasn't. 830. September 1st. 270 short. And the fast money spent, the water right sold, the standing crop gone, the West Wing empty, the applewood hauled away. She'd flipped the board over on Silas Crane, and it had carried her 3/4 of the way, and no further. 270, Josiah said, reading the number over her shoulder. He'd stopped asking permission to read her ledgers weeks ago. That's the hard part. The easy money's gone. What's left'll come slow, and slow's what Crane wants. I know it. You could go to him. Offer the 830 against the 1100, ask him to carry the rest a season. Some note holders would. Crane won't. Evelyn was certain of it. He doesn't want the money, Josiah. He never wanted the money. He wants the estate. He'll take the 830 and hold me to the September date, knowing I'm short because the whole point is that I fail. If I gave him $1,099, he'd hold me to the last one and take the house. She rubbed her eyes. He's not a creditor. He's a patient man with a long knife. Paying him partial only sharpens it. The study was quiet. Outside the light was going. Then I don't know where the 270 comes from, ma'am, Josiah said finally, and it cost the old man to say it. She could hear how it cost him. I've turned it every way I know. There's no more fast money in this ground. I'm sorry. Evelyn looked at the ledger for a long time, and then she said a thing that surprised her as much as it surprised him, because it had been sitting in the back of her mind for 2 weeks, and she had refused to look at it until there was no other place to look. There's the letters, she said. She'd found them the second week going through the old master's study for anything that might sell. A locked drawer, the key long lost that Micah had opened with a bent nail, and a boy's patience. Inside, a bundle of letters tied in ribbon, gone brittle, and a second document folded separately underneath, and she'd read enough of them by the one candle to understand that she was holding something that was not hers, and that was dangerous, and that changed everything. She got them now, and untied the ribbon with careful fingers, and laid them out on the desk in front of Josiah. Do you know whose hand this is? She asked. The old man leaned close, squinting, and she watched his face change. That's the old master's writing. Colonel's father. I'd know it anywhere, kept his books 30 years. He touched the top letter. But this here, the one he's writing to, read the name. Josiah read it. He sat back slowly. That's the Colonel's brother, Elias Carter, the one that... He stopped. The one that, what Josiah tell me. I married into this family knowing nothing but the debt. Nobody told me anything. The old man was quiet a moment, choosing. Elias was the elder son. Should have had the estate, all of it being firstborn. But there was a falling out, 10, 12 years back before the old master died. Elias left. Went south or west, nobody rightly knew. Family said he was dead. The Colonel Nathaniel, he was the second son. And when the old master passed, Oak Ridge came to Nathaniel, and Elias's name never got spoke again. He looked at the letters. Why's the master got a whole bundle of letters to a son that's supposed to be dead? Because he isn't dead, Evelyn said. Or he wasn't when these were written. Read the dates. Josiah read. This last one's 4 years ago. That's after the old master himself was dead. That's the thing that stopped me cold when I found it. Evelyn separated the last letter from the bundle. The old master died 6 years ago, but this letter's dated 4 years ago in his hand to a living Elias, which is impossible. A dead man can't write. She turned it over. Unless it's forged, Josiah breathed. Unless it's forged. She laid it beside one of the genuine older letters. Look, the genuine ones, the old ones, the hand shakes a little, an old man's hand. This last one's steadier. Someone copied the old master's writing to make it look like he'd kept up a correspondence with Elias right until his death, to make it look like Elias was known of, accounted for, and chose to stay away. She looked up. Now why would anyone forge a dead father's letters to a disinherited brother? Josiah's old face had gone gray. To cover something. To make a story hold. If somebody wanted folks to believe Elias was gone by his own choice, alive and well, and just gone when maybe he wasn't gone by choice at all. When maybe? Evelyn said quietly, Elias Carter had a prior claim to this entire estate, being firstborn, and somebody needed him to stay, disappeared, so the estate would pass clean to the second son. The name hung in the air between them unspoken. Neither of them said Nathaniel. Neither of them had to. Josiah stood up abruptly and walked to the window and stood with his back to her, and when he spoke his voice was rough. I've served this family my whole life, ma'am. I don't want to think it. The Colonel's cold, God knows, cold as they come, but I never took him for. I don't know that it was him, Evelyn said, and she meant it. I don't know anything yet. I found a forged letter in a locked drawer. That's all I know for certain. It could be the lawyer's doing. Could be the old master's own last madness. Could be 100 things. She gathered the letters back up carefully. But there's a second document under the bundle, Josiah, and that's the one that keeps me up nights. She unfolded it and laid it flat. Josiah came back to the desk and looked at it and did not understand it at first. And then he did, and he put one hand flat on the table to steady himself. That's a deed, he said. It's the deed. The original conveyance of Oak Ridge. And read the name of the party it conveys to. He read. He read it twice. Elias, he whispered. It conveys to Elias Carter, the elder, not to Nathaniel. He looked up stricken. Ma'am, if this deed is real, if this is the true deed and it names Elias, then Nathaniel never owned Oak Ridge to begin with. And that means when the Colonel signed this estate over to me as part of my marriage settlement, Evelyn said, and her own voice was not entirely steady now. He signed over something that was never legally his to give, which means my claim to it, the claim I've been half killing myself to defend against Silas Crane, may be worth exactly nothing. The study was silent, but for the tick of the old clock, and somewhere in the house, Hannah moving pots. Or? Evelyn went on slower. It means the forged letters and the buried deed are two halves of the same crime, and someone went to a great deal of trouble to make Elias Carter disappear on paper, so that Nathaniel could inherit and then hand me a poisoned gift. And that someone is still out there. And Silas Crane, who bought my father's debts cheap, who priced this estate as a corpse, who's so very certain he'll have Oak Ridge by September. She stopped. You think Crane knows? Josiah said. I think, Evelyn said carefully, that a patient man who's been buying dead farms in this county for 20 years might know more about the Carter estate's history than a sick bride who's been here 5 weeks. I think it's a strange thing that he came the moment I arrived with the paper already bought, so sure of his ground. And I think, she folded the deed away, that I need to find out what he knows before September 1st, because right now I am fighting to keep an estate that may not be mine against a man who may know exactly why it isn't. She did not sleep that night. The fever came and she let it burn, and she sat in the east room with the deed and the forged letters spread before her, and worked the thing like a ledger, tracing every line of it until the pattern started to show through, the way the true value of the Northfield had shown through 6 years of weed. Micah found her at dawn, gray-faced but upright, and she sent him with a message she'd written out 3 times to get the wording exact. To Dr. Prue, she said. The old doctor who tended my father. He's the one man in this county I'd trust because he's the one man who never once lied to me to be kind. Ask him 3 things. 1, does he remember Elias Carter and when Elias was last seen? 2 who drew up the old master's will, what lawyer and is that lawyer still living? And 3, she hesitated, then made herself say it, 3 whether Silas Crane has ever to the doctor's knowledge done business with that same lawyer. Can you remember all that? 1 does he remember Elias and when? 2 what lawyer drew the will and's he alive? 3 did Crane ever deal with that lawyer? The boy repeated it back perfect. He'd gotten sharp these 5 weeks sharp the way frightened clever children get when someone finally treats them like they matter. Ma'am, if the deed's not yours, if Crane's got some hold if the whole thing's rotten underneath. He stopped. Why keep fighting for it? Why not just let it go? Save yourself the last of your strength. Rest like Crane said, like the Colonel meant you to. Evelyn looked at the boy for a long moment. Because I've spent my whole life being handed things that turned out to be poison, she said. My father's name, my marriage, this house. Every gift I ever got was a debt wearing a bow, and I decided my first night here that I was done being the woman things happened to. She put the letter in his hand and closed his fingers over it, the way Prue had closed hers over the doctor's paper a lifetime and 5 weeks ago. So, I'm going to find out what's rotten, and I'm going to cut it out, and if this estate turns out to belong to a lost brother named Elias, then by God, I'll find Elias and hand it to him clean with the books balanced and the fields running and the debt paid off Silas Crane's hooks, because that's the difference, Micah, between a person and a corpse. A corpse gets disposed of. A person decides. She let go his hand. Now ride, and ride careful. And if anyone asks your business, you're fetching medicine for a dying woman, which God knows is true enough. The boy rode. He was gone the whole day, and Evelyn worked and the fever climbed, and Hannah came twice with broth, and the second time stayed and said unasked, standing in the doorway with her flower arms crossed. My sister lost her place to Silas Crane. 6 years back. He carried her husband's note 2 seasons all kindness, then called it in a bad winter, and took the farm and the barn, and the both of them out into the road with 3 children. Her jaw was tight. So whatever it is you found in them papers, ma'am, whatever's got you burning up worse than the fever, if it's a thing that hurts Silas Crane, you tell me how to help. I'll not stand by cooking broth while that man does it again. Evelyn set down her pen. Hannah, she said, come sit down. I'm going to tell you everything I know and everything I don't. And then I'm going to need you to remember something for me, because you've been in this county longer than I have, and your memory's worth more than my ledgers just now. And so it was that when Micah came pounding up the drive at dusk on a lathered horse, he found not a dying woman alone in a study, but 3 people bent over a table in the kitchen. The mistress, the cook, and the old groundsman. And they looked up at him all at once, and the boy stood in the doorway breathing hard, with the doctor's answer in his hand, and his young face was so strange that all 3 of them stood at once. What is it? Evelyn said. Micah. What did he say? The boy swallowed. He remembers Elias, Micah said. He says Elias Carter was last seen the summer the old master died, 6 years back. Says Elias came home come back from wherever he'd gone right around when his father took sick. Says folks saw him in town the elder son come home. And then... The boy's voice dropped. And then the old master died and the will was read and it left everything to Nathaniel and Elias. Elias what? Evelyn said. Elias was never seen again, Micah said. Not in town, not anywhere. Dr. Prue says it was give out that he'd left again gone west, same as before. But the doctor says... The boy looked at all of them. The doctor says he never believed it. Because Elias Carter came home dying too, ma'am. Same lungs, same family weakness. The doctor tended him that summer, same as he tended you. And a man that sick that week. The doctor says a man that sick don't just up and ride west across the whole country and vanish. The doctor says he always reckoned Elias Carter died that summer, quiet, and got put in the ground without a stone. And the leaving west was just a story somebody told. The kitchen was dead silent. And the lawyer, Evelyn said very quietly. The one who drew the will. Is he alive? That's the last thing, Micah said. The lawyer that drew the old master's will, that read it out leaving everything to Nathaniel. The boy's hand was shaking. It's the same notary Silas Crane brings to every deal, ma'am. His own man. Been Crane's man for 20 years. Dr. Prue says they've been thick as thieves the whole time. Says everybody knows it. Says he didn't finish because he didn't have to. Evelyn Carter stood in the failing light of the kitchen with the forged letters and the buried deed in the study behind her, and felt the whole rotten shape of it lock into place. At last, clean and cold and complete. The disinherited brother who came home dying. The will drawn by a crooked hand, the letters forged to say a dead man had chosen to disappear, the deed hidden so no one would ever check whose name it truly bore. And the patient man who'd waited 6 years buying his way toward the estate, one debt at a time, so sure of his ground. Silas Crane hadn't come to collect a debt. He'd come to bury the last person alive who might ever open that locked drawer. "Ma'am," Josiah said, and his voice had gone very careful. "If that's true, if Crane and his notary faked that will 6 years back and put Elias in the ground quiet to do it, then Crane's not a man who takes farms slow and legal. He's a man who's already killed to get this one." The old man's face was ashen. "And you just spent 5 weeks making yourself famous all over this county for the one thing he can't allow. A Carter woman who reads the old books, who opens locked drawers, who won't die on schedule." Evelyn looked down at her own hands, thin still, pale still, but not shaking, not anymore. "September 1st, she said softly. "He gave me a deadline of September 1st. All kindness, all patience. Wait for the debt to come due. Wait for the sick woman to fail." She raised her eyes to the 3 faces watching her. The boy, the cook, the old man, the only 3 souls in the world who'd chosen her over the sure bet of her death. "But I've upset his arithmetic, haven't I? I've made myself into a woman who might live to September, who might raise the money, who might have gone through every drawer in that study by now." She heard her own voice go flat, and certain the way Nathaniel's had gone the day he left her, and understood for the first time that she and the husband who'd abandoned her were perhaps more alike than either of them knew. "A patient man can afford to wait for the disease to do his work, but I've just told him the disease might lose. Then he won't wait," Hannah said. "No," Evelyn agreed. "He won't wait. He can't. Not now." And in the silence that followed from far down the drive through the open kitchen window, in the last of the summer light, came the sound none of them had expected, and all of them suddenly understood the slow, unhurried, confident sound of a single good horse coming up toward the house that had been meant to be her grave. The horse was not Silas Crane's. Evelyn knew it before the rider cleared the last of the drive because Josiah knew it, and she'd learned in 5 weeks to read the old man's face faster than any ledger. His shoulders came down an inch. "That's not Crane's gelding," he said. "That's a hired horse, livery brand." And then, squinting into the dusk, "That's Dr. Prue." The old doctor came up the steps, stiff from the ride, and did not wait for greeting. "Where's the boy?" he said. "Micah. Did he tell you all of it?" "He told us," Evelyn said. "Come in. You rode after your own messenger, doctor. That's not the act of a man with good news to sit on." "No." Prue came into the kitchen and set his bag down hard and looked at the 3 faces and then at her, and she watched him decide to say the worst thing first the way he always had. "I sent the boy off this morning with your questions, and then I got to thinking, and the more I thought, the less I liked you sitting out here alone with what you'd found. So I came. And on the road." He stopped to catch his breath, and there was fear in it. Real fear. On the road. I passed Silas Crane's notary, riding hard the other way, toward town. And he had 2 men with him. I didn't know hard-looking and a satchel of papers, and he didn't slow to say good day, though he knows me 30 years. The doctor looked at her. "Something's moving, Evelyn. Tonight. Crane's man doesn't ride at dusk with strangers and a satchel for nothing." The kitchen went cold. "How long behind you?" Evelyn said. "An hour, maybe less. I'm an old man on a hired horse. Anyone could have passed me." Evelyn was already moving. "Then we haven't got the night I thought we had." She went into the study with the others crowding after and pulled the deed and the letters from where she'd hidden them behind the old master's books and laid them on the desk. Doctor, you tended Elias Carter the summer he died. You'll swear to that. I'll swear he was dying when I saw him last. And I'll swear I was never called to sign a death, which for a man that sick is the strangest thing of all. A doctor signs the death. I never signed Elias Carter's. Nobody did. He just stopped being talked about. Prue's jaw worked. I let it lie 6 years, God forgive me. Told myself it wasn't my business. It's my business now. It's all our business now, Evelyn said. Listen to me, every one of you, because we've got an hour and I'll not waste it. Crane's notary is riding to town with a satchel of papers and 2 hired men. There's only one thing in that satchel that matters. It's whatever paper Crane means to use to take this house tonight, a foreclosure moved up, a new note, a warrant, some legal thing dressed proper. He's not waiting for September. The doctor's right. Something spooked him. You spooked him, Hannah said. Sending the boy round asking about Elias and the lawyer. Word travels this county faster than any horse. Crane heard by noon that the dying Carter bride was asking after his notary. Then I did it, Evelyn said. I moved too soon. I should have... She stopped herself. There was no time for the luxury of blame. No, it's done. The question isn't what I should have done. The question is what he does next and what we do faster. She put her finger on the deed. Here's what I know. This deed names Elias, not Nathaniel. If it's genuine, the whole inheritance, 6 years ago, was fraud and everything built on it. Nathaniel's ownership, my marriage settlement, Crane's precious note against the estate, it's all built on sand. But a deed's only worth what a court says it's worth, and the court in this county is a room Silas Crane's notary has been furnishing for 20 years. She looked up. So the deed alone won't save us. A judge who's Crane's man will find 10 reasons it's a forgery, and mine's the fraud. Then what will save us? Josiah said. The one thing Crane can't buy, Evelyn said. A witness he doesn't own. Doctor, you said you never signed Elias's death. Who else tended him? A man that sick has more than a doctor. He's got someone who feeds him, sits with him, empties the basin. Who nursed Elias Carter that summer? Prue frowned, reaching back. There was a woman. Housekeeper at the time, before your Hannah's day. Older woman. She'd have been the one at his bedside, not me. I came and went. He snapped his fingers, remembering. Miara. Bridget Miara. Irish woman, sharp-tongued, kept the old master's house before it all fell to ruin. She left the county after the master died. I don't know where. I know where, Josiah said quietly. Everyone turned. Bridget Mira, the old man said. I know her. Knew her. She didn't leave the county doctor, that's just the story. She went to the poorhouse over in Danvers when Nathaniel let the staff go. She's there still, far as I know, if she's living. I bring her a little tobacco twice a year. He looked ashamed. She was good to me when my wife died. I never told anybody I still saw her. Didn't think it mattered. Evelyn felt the whole thing turn on its hinge. Josiah, she said carefully. Does Silas Crane know Bridget Mira is alive and in the Danvers poorhouse? The old man went pale. I know, I don't reckon he does. Everybody thinks she left the county years back. She keeps to herself. She's old and half-blind and nobody visits the poorhouse but... He stopped. But me. Then there is one living witness to what happened to Elias Carter that summer. Evelyn said that Silas Crane does not own, does not know about, and cannot reach before we can. She was already reaching for paper. Micah, can you find the Danvers poorhouse in the dark? I can find anywhere Josiah tells me, the boy said. Josiah goes with you. She knows him. She won't talk to a strange boy at midnight, but she'll talk to the man who brings her tobacco. Evelyn wrote fast 3 lines, folded it. This is for the master of the poorhouse in case anyone bars your way. It says you come from the Carter estate on lawful family business, and it's got my name on it as Mistress of Oak Ridge, which is worth something for another few hours at least. She pressed it on Josiah. Bring her here if she'll come and can travel. If she can't travel, get her mark and her words on paper with the doctor's own attestation that she's of sound mind. Doctor, write him a letter now this minute saying Bridget Mira is a competent witness and you'll swear to her soundness. That's the paper Crane can't forge because it's got the one honest doctor in the county behind it. Prue was already sitting to write. And you, he said, not looking up. While we're gone to Danvers. I stay, Evelyn said. Because Crane's man is riding here not to Danvers, and someone has to be at Oak Ridge when he comes, and it has to be me, because the whole game is that I'm too sick and too alone to stop him. She managed something that was almost a smile. So I'll be sick and alone, and I'll keep him talking. And I'll keep him here on this estate, arguing with a dying woman about deadlines and dollars, for as long as it takes 2 riders to reach Danvers and back. That's a fool's errand, Hannah burst out. You'll keep Silas Crane talking. He'll have his hired men. He'll not sit and debate law with you while your groundsman rides for the one witness that hangs him. She couldn't finish it. He'll what, Hannah? Evelyn's voice was quiet. Say it. You said it before he put your sister in the road. You think he'll do worse to me, too. I think, Hannah said, and her voice shook, that a man who buried Elias Carter quiet don't scruple at burying a second one. The word sat in the room. Burying. Evelyn was quiet a moment. Then she crossed to the old master's cabinet, the tall one against the wall, and opened it and took out the thing she'd found there. Her second week, and told no one about a long-barreled pistol. The old master's cleaned and oiled by Josiah's habit, even in the years of ruin, because the old man cleaned everything on this estate, whether it was used or not. Then I won't be alone, she said, and set it on the desk. Hannah stays with me. Hannah who can load, and I expect fire being a farm woman. And Micah and Josiah ride. And the doctor rides for town ahead of them, and does the one thing none of the rest of us can do. Prue looked up. Which is, wake the county, Evelyn said. You're the one honest man everyone trusts. Silas Crane wins in the dark in a locked room with his own notary and a sick woman, and no one watching. So we take away the dark. You go to town, and you knock on the doors of every farmer who's bought my water this summer. Every man who saw Josiah cut that first line into the north field, every soul who's had cause to notice that the Carter estate came back when it was supposed to die. You tell them Silas Crane is moving on Oak Ridge tonight against the law against a sick woman, and you ask them not to fight. I'll not have blood on my account. You ask them to come and watch, to be present, to stand in the yard and see it done in the open. She looked around at all of them. Silas Crane has spent 20 years doing his work where nobody looks. Elias died where nobody looked. My death was priced where nobody looks. So we make everybody look. That's how you beat a patient man in the dark. You bring the light and the witnesses, and you make him do his ugly business in front of the whole county, or not do it at all. There was a silence, and in it something changed in the 4 faces around her, and Evelyn understood that she had just done the thing she'd sworn on her first night to do. She had stopped being the woman things happened to in front of the only witnesses who mattered, and they had seen it, and they believed it. That, said Dr. Prue slowly, folding his letter, is either the finest plan I ever heard, or the last one you'll ever make. And God help me, girl, I can't tell which. Neither can I, Evelyn said. Ride. They rode. The doctor went first hardest toward town, and the doors of the men who owed the Carter estate a season's water. Then Josiah and Micah north and east toward Danvers, the boy on the fast horse and the old man on the doctor's hired one with a letter and a name, and the whole weight of the thing on their backs. Evelyn stood on the steps and watched all 3 sets of hooves swallowed up by the dusk. And when the last of them was gone, she went back inside, and she and Hannah shut the great front door. And Hannah barred it, and the 2 women stood in the front hall of the house that had been meant for a grave and looked at each other. You ever fire one of these? Hannah said, picking up the pistol, turning it in her broad hands. No. You? My husband's before he passed. Rabbits and foxes, and once a man who came drunk to the door. Hannah checked it with an ease that told Evelyn the last had been more than once. It fires the one time, and then it's a club. Don't waste the one time. She set it down within reach. Now, he'll come to the front being proud. You'll want to be sitting when he does. Sick and sitting. Let him feel big. Men like Crane, they get careless when they feel big. The cook's mouth twisted. Learned that watching my sister lose everything by standing up too straight too soon. Hannah? Evelyn caught her arm. Whatever's coming, thank you. You could have kept cooking broth and stayed clear of all of it. You chose the sick woman over the sure thing. I'll not forget it however this ends. Hannah looked at her a long moment. When you come, she said gruffly. 5 weeks back, gray as a corpse, talking big off the steps about running the estate. I thought you was mad. Or lying to yourself the way dying folks do. I've watched a lot of people die, ma'am. They all get brave right at the end all of a sudden. I figured you for that. She picked up her own weapon, a heavy iron poker from the hall grate, and hefted it. But brave at the end folks, they fade. 2-3 days of big talk, and then they turn to the wall. You never turned to the wall. 5 weeks, and you never once turned to the wall. She met Evelyn's eyes. That's when I knew you wasn't dying like the others. That's when I started cooking the good broth without being asked. So don't thank me. You earned it every day by getting up. And then before Evelyn could answer, the cook turned her head sharply toward the front of the house. Horse? They both went still. One horse. Unhurried. The slow, confident, patient sound of a single good gelding coming up the drive, the very sound Evelyn had heard cut off at the end of the last long evening, and understood at last that it had never been Crane at all that night, only the doctor. But this now. That's him, Evelyn said. That's Crane's own horse. Josiah'd know it. But, she frowned, only one. Where are his men? The notary's got 2. Where's Crane's? Maybe he thinks one sick woman don't need an army, Hannah said grimly. Or maybe, Evelyn said slowly, the men and the papers went to town with the notary to do it legal, and Crane came here himself alone to do the other thing, the quiet thing, the thing you don't want witnesses for. She looked at the pistol. Then she moved it not out of reach, but under the shawl on her lap, hidden as she lowered herself into the chair by the cold hearth, and arranged herself the way Hannah had said. Sick. Sitting. Small. Get in the back hall, she whispered. Out of sight. Don't show yourself unless I call you, or he lays a hand on me. Let him feel big, Hannah. Let him feel alone in the room with a dying woman. It's the only advantage we've got, that he thinks he's the only one who knows what tonight is. Hannah melted into the dark of the back hall with her poker. The knock came. 3 raps. Courteous. Mrs. Carter? Crane's voice through the door, warm as ever. It's late, I know, and I do apologize. But I've news that won't keep till morning, and I thought you'd rather hear it from me directly than from a stranger with papers. May I come in? Evelyn looked at the barred door. She had a choice, and she understood the whole shape of the night hung on it. Keep him out, and he'd have his men break it come dawn with the law behind them. Let him in alone, and buy the hours Josiah needed on the road to Danvers, at the price of being in a room with the man who'd buried the last person who knew too much. It's barred, Mr. Crane, she called and made her voice thin, tired, and let a cough take the end of it real enough. I haven't the strength to lift it, and my woman's gone to the village. You'll have to give me a moment. She rose slow and crossed to the door and set her hand on the bar and did not lift it. There, you'll forgive an invalid her slowness. And she leaned against the door as if the effort had cost her and said through it low, What news, Mr. Crane, that won't keep till morning? A pause on the other side. You've been asking questions, Crane said, and the warmth had thinned. About Elias Carter, about my notary, about things a dying bride's no business knowing. And I find myself wondering, Mrs. Carter, what a woman with one summer left wants with a dead man's history. Another pause. So I'll ask you plain through this door if you like. What did you find at Oak Ridge, and where is it now? There it was. He'd said it himself near enough. What did you find? Not there's nothing to find, that's what an innocent man says. Crane had come to learn how much she knew and to make sure it went in the ground with her. Evelyn made her choice. "I found the truth, Mr. Crane," she said quietly through the door. "And I'll show it to you, but I'll not shout it through 2 inches of oak for the whole county to hear. Come in and see for yourself, and then we'll talk about your September 1st and whether it's a date I need worry about at all." And she lifted the bar. He came in like a man entering a property he already owned. Silas Crane was alone, as she'd guessed, and he'd left even his hat and gloves on his saddle, which told her more than anything a man doesn't undress to do honest business. He looked around the front hall at the mended ceiling, the swept floor, the signs everywhere of a house being dragged back from the dead, and his face did a thing. She filed away. It tightened. He didn't like what she'd built. It offended him. A revived Oak Ridge was a rebuke to 20 years of buying dead things cheap. "You've been busy," he said. "I told you I would be." She'd taken her chair again, the shawl over her lap, her hand beneath it. "Water rights, a green harvest. The West Wing's furniture. $830 Mr. Crane banked and witnessed against your $1,100. I'm 270 short with 7 weeks to run. You came all this way at night to tell me I'll fail. But I don't think I will." She let a cough take her, covered it. "Sit. You'll not loom over a sick woman in her own hall. If you've come to talk, talk sitting." He didn't sit. He walked slow, proprietary a circuit of the hall, and she understood he was looking for it. The thing. The papers. His eyes went to the study door, and she made herself not follow them. "Elias Carter," she said to pull him back. "You asked what I want with a dead man's history. I'll tell you. I want to know why the deed to this estate in a locked drawer in that study bears his name and not my husband's." Crane stopped walking. For 1 full second, the warm mask was gone entirely, and what stood in her front hall was a much older, much colder thing. A man who had spent 20 years making sure no one ever said that sentence out loud, hearing it said by a dying woman in a house he'd priced as a corpse. "There is no such deed," he said. "There is. I've read it. So has my groundsman. So by now." She let the lie come easy. "Has the doctor and 1 or 2 others. It names Elias Carter, elder son, as sole owner of Oak Ridge, which means the will that gave everything to Nathaniel 6 years ago was fraud, which means the note you hold against this estate is a note against a fraud, which means, Mr. Crane, that you have spent good money buying my father's debts to foreclose on a property that was never legally the Carters to mortgage in the first place." She tilted her head. "You didn't buy a claim on Oak Ridge, you bought a share in a crime. And I've begun to wonder whether that's news to you or the whole point." The silence stretched. And then Silas Crane did the thing that told her she'd been right about all of it, that made her hand tighten under the shawl. He smiled. Slow. Real. The first honest expression she'd seen on him. "You're not dying fast enough," he said, almost admiring. "Do you know in 20 years you're the first one who ever did the reading? Your father-in-law's own sons never read that drawer. Nathaniel signed this place over to you sight unseen, glad to be rid of it. Glad to be rid of you. He never once looked in his father's study. And you?" He shook his head. 5 weeks. A sick girl. You found in 5 weeks what a whole family missed for 6 years. The smile stayed. "It's a shame, Mrs. Carter. In another life I'd have hired you." "Tell me about Elias," Evelyn said. "You've as good as admitted the rest. Tell me the one thing I can't prove. Did he die in that back bedroom the summer his father died, or did you help him along?" "Careful," Crane said softly. "Why? There's no one here but me, and I'll be dead by fall. You've said so yourself and priced it. So tell the dying woman. What happened to Elias Carter?" And Crane, patient, careful. 20 years in the dark. Silas Crane made the one mistake she'd been praying for, the mistake of a man who believes he's the only living soul who'll ever hear the words he answered. "He died," Crane said. "In that back bedroom. Of the family lungs, same as you're dying of the family lungs, and I'll swear before God I never laid a finger on him. I didn't have to. He was 3 weeks from the grave when he came home, and the only thing I did." He spread his hands, reasonable, obscene, exactly as he'd spread them the first day. The only thing I did was help a grieving family arrange matters quietly. The elder son comes home to die. It's a sad thing. Better for everyone if the estate passes clean to Nathaniel, the soldier, the pride of the county, than gets tangled up in a dead man's affairs. My notary drew the papers. The old master signed them. The old master was already dead, Evelyn said. You forged his letters. I've seen the hand. Crane's jaw tightened, and she knew she'd hit it. The papers reflected the family's wishes, he said, and now the reasonableness was cracking. Elias himself would have wanted it. He was dying. He had no wife, no child, no use for an estate. It went to his brother. That's not a crime, Mrs. Carter. That's tidiness. The only crime here is a sick woman digging up sorrow that was laid to rest 6 years ago and threatening to drag 2 dead men and a whole county's peace through the mud to do it. And you laid it to rest, Evelyn said. You, a notary who's not family, a note buyer who's not kin. You arranged the burying of Elias Carter and the forging of the will and the disappearance of the deed out of pure neighborly tidiness and asked nothing in return. She let the sarcasm bite. Except that you've spent 6 years quietly buying up every debt attached to this estate, waiting to foreclose the moment it was safe. What did they pay you, Mr. Crane, Nathaniel, and his crooked lawyer? Or did you pay yourself in the deed you've been maneuvering 6 years to own outright? The mask was fully gone now, I think, Silas Crane said very quietly, and he took a step toward her chair. That you've read a great deal too much. And I think that whatever you found in that drawer, the deed, the letters, it's here in this house tonight. And I think a sick woman, who's exhausted herself past all sense, might very well knock over a candle in the night and burn a dry old dying house to the ground, papers and all, and no one in the county would think it anything but the sad end everyone predicted. Another step. You gave yourself away, Mrs. Carter. You sent your boy round asking questions, and you sent your man off somewhere tonight. I passed no one on the road, so they've gone the back way, which means they've gone somewhere they don't want seen. You've overplayed a weak hand. You should have taken my offer and died comfortable. Now you'll take the papers and the house both, Evelyn said, and she did not move, did not reach, kept her voice level as still water. And you'll do it tonight, quiet before whatever I've set in motion comes home. That's the plan. I understand it. It's a good plan, Mr. Crane. It's the same plan that's worked for you 20 years. She looked up at him. There's only one flaw in it. And what's that? You still think you're the only one who knows. And from the back hall, Hannah's voice flat and hard. He ain't. Crane spun. Hannah stood in the dark mouth of the passage, with the iron poker in both hands, and murder in her face. And Crane's hand went to his coat, and Evelyn understood in one cold instant that Hannah had been right. The man who'd buried Elias did not scruple at a second, and she brought the old master's pistol out from under the shawl and leveled it at him with both thin hands and thumbed the hammer back. I only get the one shot, Mr. Crane, she said. Hannah told me so. Don't make me spend it. Everything stopped. 3 people frozen in a mended hall. The cook with her poker, the dying woman with her one shot, the patient man with his hand half into his coat. And Evelyn heard her own heartbeat, and the tick of the old clock, and under it, faint, far off, the thing she'd been listening for the whole while she kept him talking. Hooves. More than one horse. Coming up the drive, and voices with them. Many voices, the low, rolling murmur of men, a lot of men coming through the summer dark toward the house. Crane heard it too. She watched it reach him. Watched him understand. That'll be the county, Mr. Crane, Evelyn said softly, the pistol steady. The doctor's gone round every farm that bought my water this summer, every man who watched Oak Ridge come back from the dead. He's told them Silas Crane is moving on a sick woman's house in the night against the law, and they've come. The hooves grew louder. Lantern light began to wash faint and gold through the front windows. You do your work where nobody looks, so I brought everybody. 20 years in the dark, and now here's the whole county in your yard at midnight, and you standing in a lit hall with your hand in your coat, over a woman holding your confession in her head and a pistol in her hands. She rose from the chair slow, but she rose and she did not sway. Take your hand out of your coat. Empty. And go and open that door yourself and let them in, and we'll all of us talk about Elias Carter in the light. Because that's the one thing you were never willing to do, and it's the only thing left." Silas Crane looked at the door, at the lantern light, at the poker and the pistol, and the dying woman who wasn't dying nearly fast enough. Slowly he took his hand out of his coat. Empty. "You've made a great mistake," he said, and his voice had gone to ash. "The notary has the papers. The court is mine. A deed and a doctor's word and a cook and a corpse in waiting, it won't stand. You'll have your night of theater, and come morning I'll have my foreclosure, and you'll have nothing but a grave and a story no judge will hear." "Maybe," Evelyn said. "But you forgot to ask me the one thing you came to ask. You asked what I found. You never asked what I did with it." She kept the pistol level as the first fist pounded the front door, as the yard filled with light and men and the low, angry murmur of a county that had come to watch. "The deed and the letters aren't in this house, Mr. Crane. They left it 3 hours ago in a saddlebag riding north with my groundsman, along with a letter in the doctor's own hand to a witness you don't own and never knew was living. A woman who sat at Elias Carter's bedside the whole of his last summer and emptied his basin and heard everything a dying man says at the end, and who is at this very hour being brought to swear it all before God and this county." She saw the words land, saw them break something in his face that 20 years had kept whole. "You buried Elias where nobody looked, but you forgot the woman who nursed him. Her name is Bridget Mira, and she's alive, and she's coming here." The front door shook under a second blow and a voice. Dr. Pruse called through it, "Evelyn, Mrs. Carter, we're here. Open in God's name. Are you harmed?" "I'm well." "Doctor," she called back, eyes never leaving Crane. "Come in. Bring them all in." Mr. Crane was just about to explain to the whole county what became of Elias Carter. And Silas Crane, cornered at last, in a lit room he could not darken in front of witnesses, he could not buy with the one living voice that could hang him already on the road, did the only thing a patient man can do when his patience finally runs out against someone faster. He lunged, not for Evelyn, but for the study, for the drawer, for the papers he still believed were there, and Hannah's poker caught him across the shoulders and put him down hard onto the swept floor of the house he'd meant to burn, and the front door burst inward under the weight of a dozen farmers, and the summer night poured into Oak Ridge full of lantern light and shouting men, and Evelyn Carter stood over the fallen shape of the man who'd priced her death, the old pistol still steady in her thin hands, and did not fire the one shot, because she no longer needed to. "Somebody hold him," she said quite calmly into the sudden roar of the crowded hall. "And somebody ride the north road to meet an old woman coming in from Danvers and see her safe the last mile. She's the most important person in this county tonight, and she doesn't know it yet." They held him, and Evelyn lowered the pistol at last and felt the cough come up hard and sudden now that the thing was done doubling her, and Hannah was there in an instant with an arm around her, and the blood came into the handkerchief red as ever. But she was standing in a house full of witnesses over a beaten man, with the truth already riding home through the dark. She pressed the cloth to her mouth and straightened out of Hannah's arm, because she would not be seen folded over, not tonight, not in front of the whole county that had come at a dying woman's word. "Not yet," she whispered to the sickness, to the blood, to the fever waiting its turn. "Not yet. There's a soldier still owes me a homecoming." Bridget Mira came in from Danvers just before dawn, small and half-blind, and wrapped in Josiah's own coat. And when they helped her down in the crowded yard, she gripped the old groundsman's arm and said in a voice cracked with age but clear as a bell, "Is it true, then? Somebody's finally going to let me say it?" "It's true," Josiah said. "Say it to the doctor. Say it to all of them." And she said it. She said it sitting in Evelyn's own chair by the cold hearth, with a dozen farmers packed into the hall, and Dr. Prue writing it all down in his steady hand, and Silas Crane bound in a chair across the room where he could not stop her. She told how she'd nursed Elias Carter the whole of his last summer, how he'd wasted in that back bedroom, how she'd been the one to close his eyes when he went. She told how the notary had come the very next morning, before the body was cold, before anyone in town knew the elder son was dead, with papers already drawn. She told how she'd been paid $20 and put out of the house within the week and told to say Elias had gone west. She told how she'd kept the secret 6 years because she was old and poor and afraid, and how it had eaten at her every one of those years, and how she'd prayed to God to send someone who'd ask. And he sent a dying girl, Bridget Mira said, and reached out with her half-blind eyes and found Evelyn's hand and held it. He sent the one soul in this county too near her own grave to be afraid of anybody else's. The county heard it, every word, and when it was done and the sun was full up over the north field, the men carried Silas Crane out to a wagon to be taken to the county seat 2 towns over, not to his own crooked court, but to a magistrate. The doctor swore was honest with Bridget Miara's sworn words, and the deed and the forged letters riding along in the doctor's own careful keeping. Crane said nothing as they took him, but at the door he turned his ash-gray face back to Evelyn one last time. "You'll not live to see the end of it," he said. "These things take years. You'll be dead before any court rules. You've won a night. That's all a dying woman can win." "Maybe," Evelyn said. "But you'll spend those years in a cell waiting on the same courts, Mr. Crane. And I'd rather die free in a house I saved than live free in one I stole. We're neither of us going to enjoy what's coming, but I'll enjoy mine more." And she nodded to the men, and they took him. That was July. What came after was harder in a way she hadn't braced for because the enemy was gone, and there was nothing left to fight but the slow work and her own lungs. The $270 still had to be found because the note was still legally owed until a court said otherwise, and Evelyn would not gamble the estate on how fast a slow court moved. So she did it the hard way, the way Josiah had said would come slow. She brought the north field in properly, the whole 12 acres she'd cleared and watered, and it yielded better than any field on the estate had yielded in a decade, because it had 6 years of rest in it, and that was $200 in the fall. She sold the medicinal herbs she'd planted. Her second month dried and bundled to an apothecary in Boston, who paid well for whorehound and fever few grown clean. She hired back 2 of the old tenant families who'd been turned off in the lean years on shares, and their labor turned the middle fields green again. By the first frost, she'd banked the full $1,100 every dollar of it, and when the magistrate's ruling finally came faster than anyone expected, because Bridget Mira's testimony and the forged hand were plain as day. To an honest judge, it found the will fraudulent, the deed genuine, and the true title to Oak Ridge to have passed on Elias Carter's death without issue to his nearest living heir, which was Nathaniel. Evelyn read that part twice. "So, it's his after all," Micah said, reading over her shoulder the way Josiah did now, the way they all did. "The Colonel's. Elias died with no wife nor child, so it goes down to the brother anyhow. All this, and it was always going to be his." "It was always going to be his honestly," Evelyn corrected. "There's the difference. 6 years it was his by fraud by a dead man's forged hand and a buried brother. Now it's his by law clean with the crime cut out." She set the paper down. "That matters, Micah. It matters that a thing is come by honest, even when it comes to the same place. I'd think you'd learned that this summer of all summers. But it's still his," the boy pressed, and there was fear in it, the old fear from the first night. "Not yours. You saved it. You near died saving it. You built it back from a grave, and the law hands it to the man who left you in it. What happens to us, ma'am? When he comes home, and it's his, and you're just—" He couldn't say it. "Just the wife he left to die." Evelyn was quiet a long moment. "I don't know," she said honestly, because she'd promised the boy that first night she'd never feed him a pretty lie. "I don't know what he'll do, but I know what I've done, and no ruling changes that. I know that when Nathaniel Carter rode away from a dying wife in a ruined house, and when he comes back, if he comes back to a working estate with the debts paid and the fields green and a crooked man in a cell because of it, he will have to reckon with the fact that everything he owns because the woman he threw away refused to break." She looked at the boy. "That's not nothing, Micah. A deed can say his name. It can't say he built it, It can't say he saved it. And there's not a court in this country can make him the one who did the work. That stays mine, whatever else he takes. He came home in September of the third year. 3 years near to the day from the cold morning, he'd signed her away and said the carriage is waiting and walked into the light without her name in his mouth. 3 years of campaign, and whatever a man does in a war and word had come ahead of him by a week. A letter brief in a hand she didn't recognize saying only that Colonel Carter had been discharged of his commission and was returning to settle his estate. Settle his estate, as if it were a thing to be tidied, as if there were nothing at Oak Ridge but property. She read the letter 3 times, and then she went on with the harvest, because the harvest did not wait on the return of soldiers, and because she had learned that the best answer to being made small was to be quietly and completely larger than the room a man tried to keep you in. He arrived on a gray afternoon that threatened rain and didn't deliver it. Evelyn was in the north field when Micah came running. A young man now 17 and long, not the boy of wrists and terror. And he didn't shout, he just came fast and stopped in front of her and said low, "He's here, rode up alone. He's in the yard, ma'am," looking at the house like he don't know it. Evelyn straightened from the work. She was thinner than the girl who'd come 3 years ago, and grayer at the temple than her age should have made her, and the cough had never left her. It never would. Prue said she'd carry it to the end whenever the end came. But she'd carried it 3 years past the fall. Everyone had priced, and she stood in her own green field with dirt on her hands, and the whole estate breathing around her, and she was not the woman who'd coughed blood into a handkerchief in front of a silent church. "Then I expect he's confused," she said. "Let him be confused a while. I'll come when the row's done." She finished the row, and then she walked up to the house, unhurried, wiping her hands on her apron, and she found Colonel Nathaniel Carter standing in the yard of Oak Ridge, turning slowly in a circle, like a man in a dream, staring at the mended roof. The whitewashed fences, the barns full, and the fields green, and the tenant children playing by the well, and he did not hear her come, and she stopped a dozen paces off and looked at him first. War had used him. He was leaner and harder, and there was gray in him too now, and something in the way he held himself, a stillness that wasn't calm, a watchfulness that she recognized because Prue had a word for it from the men who came back from the last war wrong. He turned and saw her, and for a moment neither of them said anything at all. "Colonel Carter," Evelyn said. He looked at her. She watched him try to place her, watched the same recalculation she'd seen in Silas Crane and the lawyer, in everyone who'd priced her low, and had to redo their arithmetic. And she watched it fail, watched him not know her. This woman in an apron with dirt on her hands, standing in the yard of his estate, like she owned the ground. "I'm looking for the mistress of this house," he said. "Or whoever's been." He gestured at all of it, the impossible green wholeness of it, running it. "There's been some mistake. This isn't—" He stopped. "I left this place a ruin. My wife is—" He stopped again. "Your wife is what?" Evelyn asked. "Dead," he said. "She had a consumption. The doctor said one winter. It's been 3 years. Something moved in his face that she couldn't read. "I came to settle the estate. Bury her properly if it wasn't done. Whoever's been keeping the place, I'll pay them fair, but the property's mine now and—" "Your eyes are gray," Evelyn said, "like weather that can't decide, and your voice does this thing at the end of a sentence where it goes down instead of up, like you've already decided no one's listening." The colonel went absolutely still. She watched the words hit him, watched him hear his own words, the words he'd said to her in the doorway 3 years ago, the cruelest kind thing he'd ever done, the proof that he'd seen her and chosen not to care, come back at him out of the mouth of a woman he'd taken for a servant. Watched the color leave his face. "Evelyn," he said. Barely a sound. "You remembered it after all," she said. "Or I remembered it for you. One of us kept it." She came closer, unhurried. "Hello, Nathaniel. Welcome home. You'll find some things changed." He couldn't speak for a moment. She let him not speak. She'd waited 3 years. She could wait through a silence. "They told me you were dead," he finally said. "My aide had it from there was a letter 2 winters back said the Carter estate had passed the wife deceased. I thought. He looked at her, and there was something raw breaking through the soldier's stillness. I sent money, twice a year, the whole time. I never stopped sending it even after I thought you were— I know you sent money, Evelyn said. It was less than you owed and more than you had to, and I banked every dollar and used it to hire back the men you'd turned off. Thank you. She said it flat, no gratitude in it, only accounting, and she saw him flinch to hear his own coldness return to him with interest. The letter that said I was dead was Silas Crane's doing. He put it about that I'd died so the county would stop watching while he took the estate. It was nearly true. I nearly obliged him. She turned and looked at the house. But I found I had other plans. Crane. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. The note buyer. My father knew him. Your father knew him very well, Evelyn said. So did your brother. And she watched that land, too. My brother's been dead 10 years, longer. He went west before I— Your brother came home to die 6 years ago, and Silas Crane buried him quiet and forged your father's will, so the estate would pass to you clean, and then spent 6 years buying up the debts so he could take it off you in the end, Evelyn said. It's all in the county records now. There was a trial. Crane's in a cell. Bridget Mira testified you won't remember her. She nursed Elias, your father put her out. The deed to Oak Ridge had your brother's name on it, Nathaniel. Not yours. Not until a court ruled Elias died without issue, and it came down to you honest this past spring. She looked at him. You've owned this estate lawfully for about 6 months. Before that you owned a crime. You just didn't know it. Neither did I until I opened a locked drawer looking for something to sell to keep from starving in the house you left me to die in. Nathaniel Carter stood in the yard and took it blow after blow. And to his credit, she'd give him this later when she was fairer. He didn't argue, and he didn't flinch away from it. He stood and heard the whole of what had been done in his name and under his roof while he was off at a war, and his face went through grief and horror and a dawning, terrible understanding. And at the end of it, he said the thing she had not expected and could not have prepared for. You did all of this, he said, not a question. Dying alone, with no help and no money, and my name for a millstone. You saved an estate I didn't deserve from a crime I didn't know about, and you caught the man who killed my brother. He looked at her, and his voice broke on it. Why? Why not let it burn? Why not let Crane have it and go somewhere and live whatever was left to you? Why fight 3 years for a house that belonged to the man who left you to die in it? And there it was, the question Micah had asked her the first night, and Crane had asked at the barred door, and now the man himself home from his war standing in the wreckage of his own understanding. Sit down, Colonel, Evelyn said. You look like a man who's been standing a long time. Hannah, she called toward the house. The Colonel's home. He'll want feeding, and he'll want it strong, not the thin stuff. And she saw the corner of the house where Hannah had appeared, pokerless now, but no less formidable, and saw the cook take one long look at the man who'd left them all to rot and turn back inside without a word, which was its own kind of verdict. They sat on the porch of the house she'd saved, and Evelyn told him why. I didn't do it for you, she said. I want that clear before anything else. Not one nail of it was for you. If you'd been in my mind those 3 years, I'd never have lifted a finger. I'd have let it fall just to spite you. She looked out over the fields. I did it because on my first night here, sick as I was with your staff already measuring me for a grave, I understood something. I'd spent my whole life being handed to people. My father handed me to you. You handed me to this house. This house was meant to hand me to the ground. Every soul who ever had charge of me had already decided what I was for, and what I was for was to disappear quietly and cost nobody any trouble. Her voice was steady, and I decided I would not. Not because of you, because of me, because I would rather spend 1 summer building something than a lifetime being spent. And then the 1 summer turned into 3 years, because it turns out a body with a reason burns different than a body without one. Your own doctor could tell you. The reason kept me alive past every date they set. I'm not, Nathaniel started. I'm not finished. She said it without heat, and he closed his mouth, and she understood that whatever 3 years of command had made him, he still knew how to take an order when it was given plain. You asked why I didn't let it burn. Here's why. Because letting it burn would have been letting you win. Not the you sitting here. The you that rode away. The you that priced my death and walked into the light without my name. If I'd let Oak Ridge fall, that man would have been right. Right that I was nothing. That I was a debt. That I was a thing that happens and then stops happening. And I would not give him that. I would not die and prove him right. She turned and looked at Nathaniel full in the face. So I lived, and I built, and I made this estate worth 10 times what you left out of pure spite and pure will, and the spite ran out somewhere in the second year, but the will didn't, and by the end, I wasn't doing it against you at all. I was doing it because it was mine. The work was mine. The fields were mine. Micah and Hannah and Josiah chose me over the sure bet of my dying, and they became mine, and I became theirs. And that's a thing, you have never once had Nathaniel Carter in your whole cold life, people who chose you. I built that, not the house, the belonging. And no deed with your name on it can take it, because it was never written down anywhere but in the getting up every morning which you weren't here to see. The colonel was quiet a long time. No, he said finally. I've never had that. And then so low she almost missed it. I left because I couldn't stand to watch another thing die in front of me. I'd watched there was a great deal of dying where I was before I ever met you. And they brought me a bride with blood on her handkerchief and told me she'd be dead by winter, and I... His hands closed on his knees. I couldn't do it again. Watch one more. So I put you somewhere I wouldn't have to see it, and I told myself it was mercy you'd die comfortable in the country, not dragged along on campaign. And I made myself not learn your name, because a name is a thing you grieve, and I was done grieving. I was full up with it. He looked at her, and the soldier's stillness had cracked all the way through now, and what was under it was a man who'd been running from death so long he'd forgotten what he was running toward. It wasn't cruelty, Evelyn. I know it looked like cruelty. It was cowardice dressed as mercy. I couldn't watch you live either, you see. Living was the worst risk. If you lived, I'd have to... He stopped. I'd have to hope. And I didn't have any left. Evelyn looked at him for a long moment, and something in her that had been clenched for 3 years clenched since the church, since the handkerchief, since the carriage's waiting loosened just slightly. Not forgiveness, not yet. But the first understanding that the man who'd left her had not been a monster with ice for blood. He'd been a coward, yes. But a coward, the way the drowning are cowards, grasping and thrashing and pulling others down, not from malice, but from a terror so total it had eaten everything human in him. She knew something about being priced for dead. She had not known until now that he'd priced himself the same way. That's the truest thing you've ever said to me, she said. It's still not enough. But it's true, and I'll take true over kind. I always have. I know it's not enough. I don't... He shook his head. I don't imagine anything could be. I came home to bury you. I find you've buried the version of yourself I abandoned, and built something I can't even... He gestured helplessly at the green fields, the full barns. I don't know how to be here. This is mine on paper, and yours in every way that's real. I don't know what a man does with that. Neither do I, Evelyn admitted. So we won't decide it today. She stood. You'll stay because it's your name on the deed, and I'll not have the county talking. You'll have the west wing. I rebuilt it. It's the finest part of the house now, which I'll thank you to appreciate, as it was a ruin when you left it. And we'll go on. And we'll see what two people who were both left for dead make of a house between them when neither one of them is running anymore. She paused at the door. But understand me, Nathaniel, I am not the bride you signed away. That woman is gone. She died the way everyone predicted. She just died into someone else instead of into the ground. Whatever we become, you don't get her back. You get me. And I am a great deal harder to leave in a doorway. She went inside, and Colonel Nathaniel Carter sat alone on the porch of the estate, His dead wife had raised from the grave in the gray light of a homecoming he could not have imagined, and for the first time in more years than he could count, he did not feel the pull to ride away from a thing before it could hurt him. He felt instead the strangest and most terrifying thing a man in flight from death can feel. He felt like staying. The trouble came as trouble does from the one direction none of them had thought to guard. It was 3 weeks into the strange, careful peace of two people learning to share a house they'd both in their different ways thought was theirs alone. Nathaniel had proven useful in ways she hadn't expected. He knew the middle fields from his boyhood, knew which of the old tenant families could be trusted. Knew the land, the way you know a thing you loved before you learn to run from it. He worked. That surprised her. She'd expected a soldier home from war to sit and be waited on, and instead, he was up before her some mornings mending fence, saying little, doing much. Micah watched him with open suspicion. Hannah fed him grudgingly. Josiah, oldest and gentlest, was the first to thaw the two old men, finding a wordless truce over the shared work of the land. And then the rider came. He came in uniform on a government horse with a dispatch case, and he asked for Colonel Carter by rank. And Evelyn knew before the man dismounted that whatever it was the thing that would test everything they'd built in 3 careful weeks. Nathaniel read the dispatch standing in the yard. She watched his face close, watched the soldier's stillness come back down over the man who'd been learning to stay, and when he'd read it twice, he folded it and looked at her across the yard with something like despair. "They're recalling me," he said. "There's a new campaign forming. My commission's not fully discharged. There was a clause, a term of years. They've the right to call me back, and they're calling." He held up the paper. "I'm ordered to report within the month, or be named a deserter." The yard went silent. Micah had stopped his work. Hannah stood in the doorway. Josiah leaned on his rake, and Evelyn Carter stood in the field she'd raised from ruin and looked at the man who'd just in 3 weeks begun to learn how to stay and understood that the last and hardest fight of all was not against a crooked man or a killing disease or a locked drawer full of secrets. It was against the thing that had made Nathaniel leave her in a doorway in the first place, and this time the government itself was on its side. "Then go," Evelyn said. It was not what any of them expected. Micah's head came up sharp. Hannah's mouth opened. And Nathaniel, standing in the yard with the dispatch folded in his hand, looked at her as if she'd struck him. "Go," she said again, and her voice was steady and cold as the day he'd left her. "Report within the month. Be a good soldier. It's what you're for, isn't it? It's what you told me the first day the campaign, the front, the thing that mattered more than a dying wife. Well, now there's a living one and an estate besides, and I expect they matter less than the campaign too. So go. I ran this place 3 years without you. I'll run it 30 more." She turned and walked back into the field. He came after her. She heard his boots in the turned earth quick, and she didn't stop, and he caught her arm the first time he'd touched her since the church, since the day the pen crossed the paper, and she went still at it more from shock than his strength. "Don't do that," he said low. "Don't hand me the door and tell me to walk through it. You did that just now the way I did it to you. Cold clean, so it can't be argued with. I know the trick because I taught it to you." His hand stayed on her arm. "Look at me. You said 3 weeks ago we'd see what 2 people left for dead make of a house between them. That wasn't nothing what you said. Don't take it back now because a paper came. I'm not taking anything back." She pulled her arm free, but she faced him. "I'm giving you what you gave me. A clean leaving, no arguing. I learned it from a master." The bitterness came up hot. "You think this is spite? It's not. It's mercy. Nathaniel, the same mercy you gave me. You can't watch a thing die, you said. Fine. I can't watch a thing leave. Twice. I lived through it once. I built an empire out of surviving it once. I will not do it twice. So we'll skip the part where you agonize and I hope, and then you ride off anyway with your commission and the law and your own cowardice all lined up giving you leave. We'll skip to the leaving. It's cleaner. You taught me that. And if I don't want to go, it doesn't matter what you want. You said it yourself. Report or be named deserter. They've the right to call you and they're calling. What you want was never the thing that decided your comings and goings. You didn't want to marry me either. You did it because it was the arrangement. Well, this is the arrangement now. Go be a soldier. It's tidier for everyone. Tidier. She heard the word come out of her own mouth. Crane's word, the word she'd despised, the word that had covered a murder. And she saw Nathaniel hear it too, saw him recognize it, and for a moment they both stood in the field, with the ugliness of it between them. That's his word, Nathaniel said quietly. The man who buried my brother. You just used the note buyer's word on me. Then we're even? Evelyn said. You used it on me first 3 years ago without ever saying it. The Whitmore name is retired with honor. That's what you told the lawyer while I coughed blood in the corner. Tidy. You've always been tidy about the people you throw away. Her voice cracked, despite her the first crack in 3 years of building herself into something that didn't crack. So don't stand in my field and act wounded that I've learned to be tidy back. And she left him there and went into the house and did not come out for the rest of the day. That night, Micah found her in the study at the ledgers the way he'd found her the first night 3 years and a lifetime ago. You don't mean it, he said, telling him to go. I mean every word of it. You don't. The young man came in and sat uninvited the way he'd earned the right to years ago. I watched you 3 years, ma'am. I watched you when you thought nobody was looking. You never once said a thing you didn't mean. Except now. You're saying go, 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 and I've never seen you lie so hard about anything. He leaned forward. You want him to stay. You're just so scared of asking for a thing and being left again that you'd rather push him out the door yourself than risk him choosing it. That way it's your choice. That way it don't hurt like the church hurt. His young face was fierce. But that's not living, ma'am. You told me that first night. A corpse gets disposed of, a person decides. You're not deciding. You're disposing of him before he can dispose of you. That's the coward's version, and you're no coward. I know because I watched you not be one for 3 years. Evelyn set down the pen. She looked at the young man she'd raised up out of a frightened boy, and she understood he was handing her own words back the way she'd handed Nathaniel his, and there was nowhere left to go behind them. When did you get wise? She said, not quite steady. Same summer you got brave? Micah said. Watching you. Now go tell that man the truth before that dispatch decides it for you. You beat Silas Crane by bringing everything into the light. You told me that's how you win against a thing that lives in the dark. So quit hiding this in the dark too. She found Nathaniel in the West Wing, in the fine rooms she'd built out of ruin, sitting in the dark, with the dispatch on the table in front of him, and a lamp unlit beside it. He didn't turn when she came in. I've written my acceptance, he said. It's sitting there. I've only to sign it and send it back in the morning, and I report within the month. It's the sensible thing. You're right that it's tidy. You're right about all of it. His voice was hollow. I've been sitting here 2 hours trying to make myself pick up the pen. I can't do it. I've signed 100 orders that sent men to die, and I can't sign one paper that takes me away from a woman who's told me plainly to go. He laughed, and it was an awful sound. That's the joke of it, Evelyn. You've done everything to push me out the door, and it's the first door in my life I don't want to walk through. Evelyn crossed the room and lit the lamp herself because she would not have this conversation in the dark. Not this one. I lied to you today, she said. He turned. In the field. I told you to go clean and cold, and I told myself it was mercy, and it wasn't. Micah had to tell me what it was. She sat down across from him, the dispatch between them. It was cowardice. The same cowardice you had 3 years ago, running from a thing before it could hurt you. You ran from watching me die. I was running from watching you leave. We're the same animal, Nathaniel. We just run in different directions. She folded her hands. I don't want you to go. There it is, plain in the light the way I beat Crane. I don't want you to go. I want you to stay and be maddening and useful and quiet and mend fences before I'm awake and let Josiah beat you at checkers and give Micah someone to measure himself against and figure out slow over years whether 2 people who were both thrown away can make a thing between them worth more than either one alone. I want that. I've wanted it 3 weeks and I've been too scared to say it, because the last time I let myself want a thing from you, you handed me a doorway and a dead house. Evelyn, but I'll not beg you to stay, she went on. And I'll not have you stay as a deserter, hunted ashamed, hiding from the government in a house that finally came honest. I've had enough of things that came dishonest. So there's the trap, plain in the light for both of us. If you go, I lose you, and likely for good. If you stay, you're a criminal, and you drag this whole estate, everything I bled for, back into the shadow of the law, and I'll not build a home on the run any more than I'd build one on a forged deed." She looked at him. "So it's no good you not wanting to walk through the door, and it's no good me wanting you to stay. The paper decides it. Same as the paper decided everything 3 years ago, when a pen crossed a marriage contract like a business ledger. We're back where we started, Colonel. 2 people and a piece of paper that owns us both." The lamp burned between them. And then Nathaniel Carter reached out and picked up the dispatch, his acceptance, the orders, the whole weight of the government's claim on him, and he held it a moment, and Evelyn thought he meant to sign it after all. He held it to the lamp flame instead. "Nathaniel, I spent 3 years learning what it costs to be a ghost," he said, watching it catch. "I was a good soldier because I'd already died inside, and a dead man makes a fine soldier. He's not afraid because there's nothing left in him to lose. That's what they want. That's what the campaign wants. Another man with nothing left to lose." The paper burned down toward his fingers, and he didn't flinch. "But I'm not that man anymore. You did that. You in this house, and that suspicious boy, and that cook who won't forgive me, and that old man who's decided to. 3 weeks. 3 weeks and I've got something to lose again. And a man with something to lose has got no business on a battlefield. He'll hesitate and get himself killed, and the men around him besides." He dropped the last burning corner onto the stone hearth and watched it go to ash. "I'm not going back to become a ghost again. I've been dead long enough. If they name me deserter, let them come here and arrest a farmer in his own field. I'll not sign myself back into the grave to keep a commission I took when I had nothing to live for." Evelyn stared at the ash on the hearth. "They'll come for you," she said. "You know they will. You'll have thrown away your name, your rank, your standing." "I threw away better than that once," Nathaniel said, "when I threw away you. This is the first thing I've thrown away that I'm glad to lose." He looked at her, and the soldier's stillness was gone entirely, now burned off with the paper, and what was left was just a man, tired, scarred, but present, all the way present for the first time since she'd known him. "I'll face the law. I faced worse. And I'd rather stand in a court for desertion, in the light honest with you and this county at my back, the same county you brought into the light to beat Crane, than ride off tidy to a war, and leave you a second time. Let them make their case. I'll make mine. I built nothing in my life until I came home and started mending your fences. Let a judge weigh a mended fence against a burned order and decide which is the better measure of a man." They came for him, of course. It took a month, and it was less dramatic than any of them had braced for 2 officers and a magistrate's writ arriving on an ordinary afternoon to arrest Colonel Nathaniel Carter on a charge of failure to report and suspected desertion. But by then, Evelyn had done what Evelyn did. She had not waited in the dark. She had written to the honest magistrate 2 towns over, the same one who'd jailed Silas Crane, and she had gathered letters from Dr. Prue attesting to the trauma the colonel carried from his campaigns, the affliction the doctor had seen in a dozen returning men, from the tenant families testifying that Carter worked his own land like an honest yeoman and had turned a criminal enterprise into a lawful, thriving estate. From the county itself, the same farmers who'd come with lanterns at midnight, now signing their names to a petition that the colonel who'd helped hang Silas Crane's memory and restore Elias Carter's stolen honor was worth more to the Republic behind a plow than behind a gun. And she had done one thing more, the sharpest thing, the thing only she would have thought of. She had gone back into the county records, into the whole ugly history of the fraud, and she had found the clause, the term of years clause, in Nathaniel's commission that the government was using to recall him, and she had traced who drew it up and when, and she had found buried in it that the commission itself had been arranged 6 years before by the same crooked notary who'd forged the Carter will. Silas Crane's man. The recall order rested on paperwork drawn by a convicted forger. It didn't erase the desertion. But it put a crack in the government's whole claim enough for an honest magistrate to work with enough to turn a hanging matter into a question of law. "You found a forged thread in the government's own coat," Nathaniel said, reading it 3 days before the trial. "You've been fighting Crane's forgeries 3 years, and now you've turned one to save me." "I've learned that everything crooked leaves a thread," Evelyn said. "Crane taught me that. Pull the right one, and the whole garment comes apart. Your recall's built on his notary's work, same as your inheritance was. It's all one rotten cloth. I'm just the one who reads the seams." The trial was held in the honest court, and it was not tidy, and it was not certain, and Evelyn sat through every hour of it with her hand around a handkerchief that still came away red some mornings, 3 years past the fall she should have died in. Nathaniel did not defend himself with a soldier's arguments. When the magistrate asked why he'd burned a lawful order, he told the truth. The whole of it. The ghosts and the cowardice, and the woman he'd left to die and come home to find, had built a world. He told a courtroom full of his neighbors that he'd been a dead man wearing a uniform and that a dying woman had taught him how to live, and that he would rather be hanged for a farmer than decorated for a corpse. The county wept, some of them, hard men who'd come with lanterns, and the magistrate, honest, careful weighing a forged commission against a burned order against a petition signed by half the county, ruled that the recall order was defective, tainted at its origin by the same fraud that had poisoned the whole Carter estate and could not stand as drawn. Colonel Carter was discharged of his commission honorably on grounds of infirmity of service and the demonstrable corruption of his enlistment papers. He would not hang. He would not go back. He was free. It should have been the end. It nearly was. But endings, Evelyn had learned, are like estates. They don't come clean unless you do the last hard thing yourself. They rode home from the county seat in the same carriage, and for a long while neither spoke, and then Nathaniel said, "It's over then. All of it. Crane the estate, the commission. You've won every fight there was to win." He looked at her. "So why do you look like there's one left?" "Because there is," Evelyn said. "The hardest one. And it's not against Crane or the government. It's the one you started in the field a month ago, and I ran from, and then you ran from, and we've both been too busy fighting the law to fight it out ourselves." She turned to face him in the swaying carriage. "You burned your orders. You stood in a court and said I taught you to live. That's a fine speech, Nathaniel. But a speech in a courtroom's easy. There was a magistrate to impress, and your neck on the line. I want to know what you say when there's no court, no law, no charge over your head. When it's just two people in a carriage and nothing to win. Do you stay because you've nowhere else to go and no commission to go back to? Or do you stay because you choose it? Because I've been chosen out of convenience my whole life, and I'll not do it again, not even with you. Not even after all this. I'd rather be alone in a house I built than kept in one out of a man's lack of anywhere better to be." The carriage rocked on. Nathaniel was quiet. "You want to know if I'd choose you?" he said, with a free hand. "No paper, no war, no rope. If a man with every door in the world open still walked through yours." "Yes." "Then stop the carriage." She frowned. But she rapped the roof, and the driver drew up on the empty road, and Nathaniel opened the door and stepped down into the afternoon and held out his hand to her. "Every door in the world's open to me now," he said. "That's what the court gave me back. My name, my freedom, the whole open road. I could ride anywhere from here. West like my brother was supposed to. Anywhere. No commission, no charge, nothing holding me." He kept his hand out. "So here I am on an open road with the whole world in front of me, and nothing making me do a single thing. And I'm asking you to come down out of that carriage and walk back to Oak Ridge with me. On foot. The long way. Because I want to, and for no other reason on this earth. Not the paper, not the war, not because I've nowhere else. Because out of every door open to me, the only one I want is the one you built." His voice was rough. "I couldn't say your name 3 years ago because a name's a thing you grieve. I'll say it now. Evelyn. Evelyn Carter. I choose you with a free hand and an open road and every reason in the world to run, and I'm done running. Come home with me." Evelyn Carter looked at the hand held out to her, 3 years ago, a man had signed her away without a tremor and walked into the light without her name and left her in a doorway to die on a schedule the whole county had bet on. And she had refused. She had refused to die and refused to break and refused to be a thing that happened and then stopped happening. She had built an estate out of spite and a life out of will and a family out of 3 people who chose her over the sure bet of her grave. She had beaten a murderer by dragging him into the light, and beaten the government by reading its seams, and beaten death itself by simply stubbornly every single morning getting up. And now the man who'd left her stood on an open road with the whole world at his back and asked with a free hand to walk the long way home to the house she'd raised from a grave. She took his hand. She stepped down. And she did not do it because she needed him. She had proven past all argument that she needed no one, and she did not do it to forgive the church or the doorway, or the 3 words that had nearly killed her. She did it because she had spent her whole life being chosen out of convenience and priced out of pity. And here at last was a man choosing her out of nothing but wanting, with every easier road open, and refused. And she had decided long ago in a fireless study by one guttering candle that she was done letting other people decide what she was for. So she decided. She chose it back. The long way. She agreed and started walking and did not let go his hand. You'll be winded before I am. My lungs are ruined and I've still more wind than you. That's what 3 years of getting up every morning does. Try to keep pace, Colonel. And Nathaniel Carter, discharged and free and chosen, laughed a real laugh the first she'd heard from him, a sound that had been buried under a war and 6 years of ghosts, and kept pace the long way down the road toward the green fields and the mended house, and the boy who'd grown wise, and the cook who'd forgive him eventually, and the old man who already had. They did not walk into a fairy tale. Her lungs did not heal. She carried the cough to the end of her days, however many the getting up bought her, and it bought her a great many. He carried his ghosts. Some nights the war came back, and she'd find him in the dark of the West Wing, and sit with him the way Bridget Mira had sat with a dying man present, unflinching, unafraid. They fought. They were both too stubborn and too scarred not to. Oak Ridge was never a perfect place, but it was theirs, honest, come by clean, built by the one and chosen by the other, and every soul who lived on it had chosen to be there, which is the only thing that ever made a house a home. And the woman the whole county had priced for a grave, the debt married and warehoused and left to die on schedule, lived out her years as the mistress of a thriving estate, feared a little and loved a great deal, and never once again in her life left standing in a doorway by anyone, because she had learned in one ruined summer the only lesson that ever truly saves a person, and she had never unlearned it, that survival is not something that happens to you, and love is not something that rescues you, and no one is ever coming to decide your worth but yourself. Evelyn Whitmore. Carter did not wait to die. She decided to live, and she did, and that decision outlasted every man who ever bet against it.